In the summer of 1221, dozens of ships appeared upon the western horizon, long before anyone standing along Japan's coastline could distinguish their banners. The people already knew who had come. For years, stories had traveled across the sea. Entire kingdoms had fallen. Great cities had surrendered. Powerful emperors had bowed before a single ruler whose empire stretched farther than anyone thought possible. His name was Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, ruler of the Mongol Empire. By the late 13th century, his empire had become the largest continuous land empire the world had ever known. From the frozen forests of Siberia to the deserts of Persia, from the mountains of Central Asia to the shores of China, millions now lived beneath Mongol rule. Only one island nation lying beyond the Eastern Sea had refused him, Japan. It had not declared war, nor insulted the Khan. It had simply refused to submit. Years earlier, messengers carrying official letters had arrived from the Mongol court. Their request appeared straightforward. Japan should recognize Kublai Khan as its superior. In return, trade would continue peacefully. Many neighboring kingdoms had already accepted similar arrangements. The Japanese government quietly read the letters, then chose not to answer. Another delegation arrived. Again, no reply. Eventually, the silence itself became an answer. For Kublai Khan, one of the most powerful rulers in history, such refusal could not simply be ignored. The first invasion came in 1274. Compared to what would follow, it was relatively small. Several hundred ships crossed the sea carrying Mongol, Chinese, and Korean soldiers. The invasion force landed upon the northern shores of Kyushu. The Japanese defenders had expected battles resembling those fought between rival samurai clans. Individual warriors announcing their names before combat. Small engagements decided by personal skill and honor. Instead, they encountered something entirely different. The Mongol armies fought as disciplined formations. Arrows filled the sky. Drums and horns coordinated thousands of soldiers at once. Explosive bombs, still unfamiliar to most Japanese warriors, burst among defensive lines. The battle shocked everyone who witnessed it. Yet something unexpected happened. As evening approached, the Mongol fleet withdrew to the safety of the sea rather than remaining ashore overnight. Then a powerful storm arrived. The weather forced many ships to retreat before the invasion could continue. The first attempt had failed. Japan understood something important. The Mongols would return. The years that followed became a race against time. Across northern Kyushu, stone defensive walls were constructed along vulnerable beaches. Samurai clans prepared for another invasion. Messengers carried warnings across the islands. Weapons were repaired. Supplies gathered. No one knew when the next fleet would appear, only that it almost certainly would. 7 years later, their fears became reality. The second invasion was unlike anything Japan had ever witnessed. This time it was not hundreds of ships. It was thousands. Historians still debate the exact number. Some estimates suggest more than 4,000 vessels. Others believe even more crossed the sea. Regardless of the precise figure, it remains one of the largest naval invasion forces assembled anywhere in the medieval world. The fleet itself reflected the enormous size of the Mongol Empire. Chinese sailors, Korean shipbuilders, Mongol commanders. Countless languages echoed across the crowded decks. Their destination remained the same, Japan. As the enormous armada approached, Kyushu lookouts standing along the coast could scarcely believe what they were seeing. The horizon itself seemed filled with ships. For ordinary villagers, it must have appeared as though the sea had transformed into wood and sail. Yet Japan no longer stood unprepared. The stone walls built after the first invasion slowed every landing. Samurai launched repeated night raids against anchored enemy ships. Small boats slipped quietly through darkness. Warriors climbed aboard larger vessels before disappearing again into the night. The battles continued for weeks. Neither side gained complete control. Then nature quietly entered the conflict. Late, another dark clouds gathered across the sea. The wind strengthened. Waves grew larger. Experienced sailors recognized the warning immediately. A typhoon approached. No one could escape it. The storm struck with extraordinary force. Powerful winds drove ships into one another. Anchors snapped, masts broke, entire vessels crashed against the rocky coastline. Others simply disappeared beneath enormous waves. For 2 days the storm raged across the invasion fleet. When calm finally returned, the sea looked completely different. Broken ships floated among shattered timbers. Debris washed onto the beaches. Countless lives had been lost. The invasion had ended, not through one decisive battle, nor through the defeat of a great general, but through the weather. The Japanese soon gave the storm a name that would echo throughout history. *kamikaze. The divine wind. Not because they believed the storm itself was unusual. Typhoons were familiar to those living along Japan's coast, rather because the timing seemed impossible to ignore. Twice the Mongol invasions had failed. Twice violent storms had arrived before the conquest could succeed. Many believed the gods themselves had protected the islands. Shrines offered prayers of gratitude. Poets celebrated the survival of the nation. The story gradually became woven into Japan's identity. Modern historians often remind us that victory resulted from many causes. Preparation, stone fortifications, persistent resistance, careful strategy. The storms alone did not save Japan, yet without them history may have unfolded very differently. That balance between human effort and nature's power makes the story so enduring. Even today, standing along the quiet beaches of Hakata Bay, it is difficult to imagine thousands of ships once covering these peaceful waters. Fishing boats now drift gently where invasion fleets once gathered. Children play upon beaches once defended by samurai. The sea carries little memory of the violence it witnessed, only the steady rhythm of waves reaching the shore. As evening settles across the western coast of Japan, the wind begins moving gently across the water. The sun slowly disappears beyond the horizon. The ancient stone walls remain standing, silent witnesses to one of history's greatest invasions. Far out at sea, their waves continue their endless journey toward the islands. Calm now, peaceful, almost unchanged from centuries ago. And somewhere beyond the horizon where sea meets sky, the memory of the divine wind still drifts quietly across the water. On a cold winter morning in the year 1703, 47 men quietly gathered outside a mansion in the city of Edo. The streets were still. Snow rested gently upon the rooftops. Most of the city had not yet awakened. The men wore simple clothing. Nothing about them immediately suggested who they truly were. Yet beneath their ordinary appearance each carried a sword. Each carried the memory of a promise made nearly 2 years earlier. Before the sun had fully risen, one of the most famous acts of loyalty in Japanese history was about to unfold. Even today, more than 3 centuries later, their story continues to be remembered. Not because they conquered an army, nor because they changed the course of a war, but because they chose loyalty even when it demanded everything. To understand their story, we must first understand the world they lived in. The early 18th century belonged to the Edo period. Unlike the centuries before, Japan was experiencing remarkable peace. The great civil wars had ended. The Tokugawa shogunate governed the country from Edo. Castles no longer prepared daily for battle. Instead, samurai found themselves serving as administrators, officials, teachers, and protectors of their domains. Their swords remained at their side, yet many would never draw them in battle. Honor became just as important as combat itself. Every action reflected upon one's family. Every decision carried responsibility. Duty stood above personal desire. It was within this peaceful yet disciplined society that Lord Asano Naganori entered history. Asano governed the small domain of Harko. By all accounts, he was respected. Neither especially famous nor unusually powerful. Yet his life became forever linked to another man, Hiri Yashinaka. Here served within the shogun's court. His responsibility included teaching proper court etiquette to visiting lords. Court life required extraordinary precision. Every bow, every word, Every movement followed traditions refined across centuries. Small mistakes could become serious insults. Exactly what happened between Asano and Kira remains uncertain even today. Some accounts suggest repeated insults. Others describe growing frustration. Modern historians continue debating the details. What is known is what happened next. On the 14th day of the third month in 1071 inside Edo Castle itself, Lord Asano drew his sword. For a samurai to unsheath a weapon within the shogun's castle was almost unthinkable. He attacked Kira. The injuries proved surprisingly minor, yet the offense itself was enormous. The Tokugawa government acted immediately. Before the day had ended, Asano received his sentence. He was ordered to commit seppuku, a ritual form of death reserved for samurai. His lands were confiscated. His family lost their position. His retainers suddenly became masterless samurai. Overnight, hundreds of loyal retainers found themselves without purpose. Some sought new employment. Others returned quietly to ordinary life. Yet 47 men made a different decision. Led by Oishikuri Ieyasu, they believed their lord had suffered an injustice. Still, they understood something equally important. Open revenge would only bring immediate punishment. Instead, they waited. Patiently. Months became a year. A year became nearly two. To outside observers, the group appeared to have abandoned any thoughts of revenge. Some took ordinary jobs. Others scattered across different provinces. Oshi himself deliberately behaved as though he no longer cared. According to tradition, he spent evenings drinking in Kyoto. He appeared careless, almost defeated. People watching him gradually lowered their guard, exactly as he intended. Every action formed part of a much longer plan. Finally, on a winter night nearly 2 years after Asano's death, 47 men quietly reunited. Each had remained faithful to the promise made long before. Their destination was Kira's residence in Edo. Snow covered the streets. The city rested peacefully beneath the night sky. The Ronin divided into two groups. One approached the front gate. The other circled toward the rear. Before entering, they respectfully informed nearby neighbors what they intended to do. They asked only that innocent people remain inside their homes. Then the attack began. Unlike dramatic stories often told in later generations, the confrontation was surprisingly brief. The Ronin searched every room. Eventually hidden inside a storage building, they found Kira. Oishi offered him the same opportunity once given to Lord Asano, to die honorably. He remained silent. When no answer came, the Ronin completed the act they had journeyed so long to accomplish. With remarkable calm, they placed Kira's head upon a cloth, then began walking across Edo, not fleeing, not hiding, walking openly towards Sengakuji Temple, the resting place of their lord. There they respectfully presented proof that their promise had been fulfilled. Only then did they surrender themselves to the authorities. The Tokugawa government now faced a difficult decision. The Ronin had clearly broken the law, yet throughout Edo ordinary people admired their extraordinary loyalty. Poets wrote about them, merchants praised them. Samurai quietly debated whether duty to one's lord should outweigh obedience to the government. The country itself seemed divided. Eventually the shogunate reached a compromise. Rather than execution as criminals, the 47 Ronin received permission to die by seppuku. The sentence acknowledged both their crime and their honor. Today they rest together beside Lord Asano at Sengakuji Temple in Tokyo. Visitors continue arriving throughout the year, especially every December when thousands quietly gather to remember their story. Fresh incense burns beside their graves. Flowers are carefully placed before each memorial. The atmosphere remains peaceful, reflective. Their story has inspired countless plays, novels, films, and works of art, not because history proved every detail beyond question, but because the questions it raises remain timeless. What does loyalty truly mean? How far should duty extend? Can justice and law always exist together? There are no simple answers. Perhaps that is why the 47 Ronin continue to be remembered after more than 300 years. As evening settles across Sengakuji Temple, the final visitors quietly offer their prayers. Incense smoke rises gently into the winter air. The temple bell echoes softly across the city. Snow begins falling once again, covering the old stone pathways exactly as it did centuries before. The graves remain still beneath fading light, silent reminders that some promises once made with an honest heart and continue echoing through history long after the voices that made them have fallen. On a quiet summer morning in the year 1582, one of the most powerful men in Japan awoke, believing the hardest years of his life were already behind him. His armies had defeated rival warlords. Ancient castles had fallen beneath his banners. The long years of endless civil war finally seemed to be drawing toward an end. Peace, though still distant, no longer appeared impossible. His name was Oda Nobunaga. Few figures have shaped Japanese history as profoundly as he did, and yet his remarkable life would come to an unexpected end, not upon a battlefield but inside a peaceful temple. The story became known simply as the incident at Honnō-ji. To understand why that morning became so important, we must first return to an earlier Japan. For more than a century, the country had endured almost continuous conflict. Historians call this period the Sengoku era, the age of warring states. Powerful clans fought one another for land. Castles changed hands repeatedly. Alliances formed only to collapse months later. Ordinary farmers often found themselves living between rival armies. Peace became something remembered more often than experienced. Among these countless warlords, one man gradually began changing everything: Oda Nobunaga. Unlike many of his rivals, he welcomed new ideas. He encouraged trade. He embraced firearms long before many other commanders fully appreciated their potential. He believed tradition deserved respect but never blind obedience. If an older method no longer worked, he sought a better one. One victory followed another. Castle after castle surrendered. Powerful enemies disappeared. By the early 1580s, much of central Japan had accepted his authority. Many believed it was only a matter of time before the entire country became united beneath his leadership. Despite his growing power, Nobunaga rarely surrounded himself with unnecessary luxury. During the summer of 1582, he stopped at Honnō-ji, a modest Buddhist temple in Kyoto. The temple offered peaceful surroundings. Its gardens welcomed quiet reflection. For a brief moment, one of the busiest men in Japan finally enjoyed something increasingly rare: rest. Remarkably, only a small number of guards accompanied him. Most of his armies remained elsewhere, continuing campaigns across the country. There seemed little reason for concern. Kyoto rested peacefully. The roads remained open. The temple itself stood within friendly territory. No enemy army approached the city, or so everyone believed. Among Nobunaga's most trusted generals served a man named Ieyasu Mitsuhide. For many years he had fought faithfully beneath Nobunaga's command. He governed important lands, led successful military campaigns, earned considerable respect. Yet historians have long debated what lay hidden within his thoughts. Some suggest personal resentment, others believe political ambition. A few argue he feared his own future beneath Nobunaga's growing power. No surviving document provides a certain answer. Perhaps the true reason disappeared alongside the men who lived through those remarkable days. What is known is what happened before sunrise. Rather than marching toward his assigned campaign, Mitsuhide quietly turned his army toward Kyoto. As they approached the city, he reportedly spoke words that would become famous throughout Japanese history. "The enemy waits at Honnō-ji." His soldiers immediately understood. Their enemy was not another distant warlord. It was their own commander. The temple still rested peacefully as dawn approached. Birds had only just begun singing among the gardens. Inside, Nobunaga likely expected another ordinary summer morning. Instead, messengers rushed toward him carrying impossible news. An army surrounded Honnō-ji. The banners flying outside belonged to Ieyasu Mitsuhide. For a moment the reports seemed almost unbelievable. Surely there had been some mistake. Yet the sound soon became impossible to ignore. Shouts echoed beyond the temple walls. Arrows struck the wooden buildings. Smoke gradually rose into the morning sky. Realizing escape had become impossible, Nobunaga prepared himself calmly. The temple quickly caught fire. Flames spread across the wooden halls. The peaceful gardens disappeared behind thick smoke. Exactly what happened during his final moments remains uncertain. Contemporary records differ. Some describe fierce resistance. Others speak of quiet acceptance. Most agree upon one point. Rather than allowing Captain Nobunaga chose to end his own life according to samurai tradition, by the time Mitsuhide's soldiers entered the burning temple, the man they sought had already disappeared into history. The fire consumed much of Honnō-ji. Remarkably, Nobunaga's remains were never conclusively identified. That mystery has inspired centuries of speculation. Legends soon appeared. Some claimed he escaped. Others imagined secret tunnels beneath the temple. Historians generally reject such stories, yet they reveal something important. Many people found it difficult to believe such a remarkable life could end so suddenly. Mitsuhide's victory proved astonishingly brief. Only 13 days later, another of Nobunaga's trusted generals, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, returned with extraordinary speed. He defeated Mitsuhide at the Battle of Yamazaki. Mitsuhide fled. Soon afterward, he too was dead. History had turned completely in less than 2 weeks. The unification Nobunaga had begun did not end with him. Hideyoshi continued the work. Later, Tokugawa Ieyasu completed it. Together, these 3 men transformed Japan forever. Yet many historians continue wondering how different might history have become had the temple at Honnō-ji never burned. Even today, visitors can walk through the modern Honnō-ji temple in Kyoto. The original building no longer survives. It was rebuilt elsewhere after the fire. Its gardens remain peaceful. Stone pathways wind quietly beneath maple trees. Nothing immediately suggests that one of the greatest turning points in Japanese history unfolded there. Perhaps that quietness feels appropriate. History often changes not through dramatic speeches but within ordinary places. A temple, a garden, a single unexpected morning. As evening settles gently across Kyoto, temple bells echo through the ancient city. Lanterns begin glowing along quiet streets. The gardens of Honnō-ji rest peacefully beneath the fading light. The maple leaves move softly in the summer breeze. The fire that once filled these grounds has long since disappeared. Only silence remains, and within that silence the memory of one summer morning continues waiting patiently like countless other moments that quietly changed the course of history forever. On a calm morning in the year 1639, the sea surrounding Japan looked much as it always had. Fishing boats drifted quietly beyond sheltered bays. Merchant vessels moved between nearby islands. Seabirds circled lazily above the waves. To anyone standing upon the shore, nothing seemed unusual. Yet beyond the horizon, history was quietly changing. A decision made that year would shape Japan for more than 2 centuries. Not through war, not through conquest, but through silence. Japan would close its doors to much of the outside world. The policy later became known as *Sako Kudata*, the closed country. Few decisions in Japanese history have been discussed as often, and perhaps few have been misunderstood as frequently. When people hear the phrase closed country, they often imagine a nation completely cut off from the world. The reality was more thoughtful and considerably more complex. To understand why Japan made such a remarkable decision, we must first return several decades earlier. In 1543, a small Portuguese ship was blown off course during a storm. It reached the shores of southern Japan. The arrival itself seemed ordinary enough. Foreign merchants had appeared in Asia for centuries, yet these visitors carried something few Japanese had ever seen: firearms. The matchlock gun quickly attracted enormous attention. Japanese craftsmen examined every detail. Within only a few years, local workshops began producing their own versions. Soon these weapons spread across the country. At almost the same time, Christian missionaries also arrived. Among them, one of the most famous was Francis Xavier. He traveled across Japan sharing the teachings of Christianity. Some local rulers welcomed him. Others remained cautious. For ordinary people, the new religion offered unfamiliar ideas. Some accepted it, some rejected it. Many simply continued living as they always had. Trade expanded rapidly. Portuguese ships carried silk medicine, glass books, and countless other goods. Japanese silver traveled in the opposite direction. Ports grew busier. Foreign languages became increasingly familiar in certain coastal towns. For a time, everything appeared beneficial, yet beneath the surface concerns gradually emerged. European powers were expanding across Asia. The Philippines had already become a Spanish colony. Other regions experienced growing foreign influence. Japanese leaders observed these events carefully. They asked difficult questions. Did merchants always arrive alone, or were they sometimes followed by soldiers? Could religion eventually become a political tool? Would foreign nations someday attempt to control Japan itself? No one knew the answers, yet the questions themselves became impossible to ignore. When Tokugawa Ieyasu established the Tokugawa shogunate in 1603, one of his greatest priorities became stability. After generations of civil war, peace finally seemed possible, maintaining that peace mattered above everything else. His successors continued thinking the same way. Little by little, restrictions increased. Japanese citizens found it increasingly difficult to travel overseas. Large ocean-going ships were no longer constructed. Missionary activities were carefully limited. Trade gradually became concentrated within specific ports. Then came the Shimabara Rebellion. In 1637, farmers and mastless samurai rose against local authorities in western Japan. Heavy taxation played an important role. So did widespread hardship. Many participants also happened to be Christians. The rebellion was eventually defeated, yet it deeply influenced government thinking. The Tokugawa leadership feared that foreign religion and foreign politics might someday threaten a fragile peace they had worked so hard to establish. Soon afterward, the new policy reached its fullest form. Portuguese ships were no longer permitted. Missionaries were expelled. Most foreign trade became tightly controlled. Yet Japan did not completely disappear from the world. Chinese merchants continued arriving. Korean diplomatic missions maintained important relationships. Dutch traders were permitted to operate from the small artificial island of Dejima in Nagasaki. Through these carefully supervised connections, books, scientific knowledge, medical discoveries, and new technologies still entered Japan. The country had not completely closed its doors. It had simply chosen very carefully which doors remained open. For more than 200 years, this remarkable balance endured. Peace became the defining feature of the Edo period. Cities expanded. Roads improved. Art flourished. Kabuki theater attracted enormous audiences. Woodblock prints spread throughout the country. Literature reached new heights. Education became increasingly common. Many historians now view the Edo period as one of Japan's greatest eras of cultural development. Isolation paradoxically created space for extraordinary creativity. Of course, the policy also carried limitations. Japanese scholars often possessed only limited knowledge of events unfolding elsewhere. New technologies sometimes arrived slowly. International exchange became far less frequent than in neighboring regions. History rarely offers perfect decisions. Every choice creates both opportunities and sacrifices. Perhaps that is why Sakoku continues fascinating historians today. It reminds us that nations, like people, sometimes seek quietness after long periods of uncertainty. Standing today upon the shores of Nagasaki, it is difficult to imagine how carefully every foreign ship was once observed. The harbor now welcomes vessels from around the world. Visitors arrive from every continent. Languages from countless countries fill the streets. Yet somewhere beneath the modern city, the memory of those quieter centuries still remains. As evening settles across the harbor, fishing boats begin returning home. The sea reflects the golden colors of the setting sun. Gentle waves touch the old shoreline exactly as they have for centuries. Beyond the horizon, the wider world continues its endless journey. Upon the islands, lanterns begin glowing one by one. The gates may eventually have opened again, but the centuries of quiet that followed their closing continue to shape Japan even today, like ripples spreading slowly across a perfectly calm sea. On the morning of March 2, 1657, a small fire began in the city of Edo. At first no one believed it would become anything extraordinary. Fires were a familiar part of life. Most homes were built from wood. Roofs were often covered with thin wooden shingles or thatch. Paper screens divided rooms. Cooking fires burned every day. Candles and oil lamps illuminated the night. Almost everyone living in Edo had witnessed a fire before. Usually the flames were contained. Neighbors worked together. Buckets of water were passed from hand to hand. Buildings closest to the fire were sometimes dismantled to prevent the flames from spreading. Life returned to normal within days. This fire would be different. By midday, a powerful wind swept across the city. The flames leaped effortlessly from rooftop to rooftop. Entire streets disappeared behind thick clouds of smoke. Burning embers drifted through the air like glowing leaves carried by an autumn breeze. Wherever they landed, another fire began. Within hours, the blaze had spread far beyond anyone's ability to control it. The city itself seemed to burn. At the time, Edo had already become one of the largest cities in the world. Perhaps more than 1 million people lived there. Samurai residences stood beside merchant districts. Temples, workshops, markets, bridges, dia houses, all connected by an endless maze of narrow wooden streets. The same construction that made Edo beautiful now made it frighteningly vulnerable. Fire moved almost as quickly as the wind itself. Families gathered only what they could carry. Some rescued elderly parents. Others hurriedly collected family records. Children clutched small bundles of clothing. Many simply ran, hoping to stay ahead of the advancing flames. The sky grew dark not because evening had arrived, but because smoke covered the sun. Witnesses later described sparks flying high above the city. Some compared them to thousands of glowing fireflies. Others said they resembled stars falling toward the earth. The beauty of the sight only made the destruction below seem even more tragic. The fire continued burning throughout the night. Then another day, then another. Strong winds repeatedly carried the flames into districts thought to be safe. Bridges became crowded with desperate residents attempting to escape. Open fields filled with thousands seeking shelter away from the burning neighborhoods. Temples opened their gates to anyone in need. Monks offered water, food, comfort. Many ordinary citizens helped complete strangers. Moments of remarkable kindness quietly appeared amid extraordinary hardship. When the fire finally ended, the scale of the destruction became almost impossible to comprehend. Historians estimate that nearly 70% of Edo had been destroyed. Perhaps 100,000 people lost their lives. Entire neighborhoods had vanished. Hundreds of temples were gone. Thousands upon thousands of homes existed only as ash. The disaster became known as the Great Fire of Meraki. Even today it remains one of the deadliest urban fires in human history. For many cities, such devastation might have marked the beginning of decline. For Edo, it became the beginning of transformation. Almost immediately, rebuilding began. The Tokugawa government carefully studied what had happened. Wider streets were planned. Open spaces were created to slow future fires. Certain districts were reorganized. Firefighting gradually became more organized than ever before. Professional fire brigades expanded across the city. Their colorful uniforms and remarkable courage eventually became celebrated throughout Edo. The city learned, adapted, improved. Within only a few years, markets reopened. Bridges welcomed travelers once again. Craftsmen rebuilt homes with extraordinary determination. Life returned. Visitors arriving decades later often struggled to imagine that such a disaster had ever occurred. The bustling capital they encountered seemed vibrant, prosperous, alive. Perhaps that became the true legacy of the Great Fire, not simply destruction, but resilience. History often remembers disasters because of what they destroy. This one is equally remembered because of what people chose to build afterward. Today, walking through modern Tokyo, it is almost impossible to recognize the old streets of Edo. Towering buildings now stand where wooden neighborhoods once stretched toward the horizon. Cars quietly replace horses. Electric lights illuminate roads once lit by paper lanterns. Yet beneath every modern district, the memory of the old city still rests. Archaeologists occasionally uncover pottery coins, roof tiles, silent reminders of the countless lives once lived there. As evening settles across Tokyo, the city glows with millions of lights. Trains cross the skyline. People return peacefully to their homes after another ordinary day. Far below the modern streets, the old foundations of Edo remain hidden beneath the earth. Quiet, patient, remembering a spring when fire transformed one of the world's greatest cities, and how, from the ashes, a new Edo slowly rose once more. On a quiet spring morning in the year 1612, two men stood facing one another upon a small island. The sea surrounding them was calm. Fishing boats drifted quietly in the distance. A gentle breeze carried the scent of salt across the narrow shore. Nothing about the morning suggested that it would become one of the most famous duels in Japanese history. One man had arrived early. He stood patiently beside the water. His swords rested at his side. His movements remained calm, measured, almost effortless. The other had not yet appeared. The waiting swordsman was Miyamoto Musashi. Even during his own lifetime, stories about him had already begun spreading across Japan. Some claimed he had fought dozens of duels. Others insisted he had never once tasted defeat. As the years passed, the stories only grew larger. Today, Musashi is remembered as perhaps the greatest swordsman in Japanese history. Yet his life was never simply about winning battles. It became a lifelong search for understanding. Musashi was born during one of the most turbulent periods in Japanese history, the Sengoku era, an age when nearly every generation experienced war. Children grew up hearing the sounds of marching armies. Castles rose upon distant hills. Alliances changed with astonishing speed. For many young samurai, skill with the sword meant survival itself. Musashi's early life remains partly hidden by history. Even his exact birthplace continues to be debated. What most historians agree upon is that he fought his first duel while still a teenager. His opponent was an experienced swordsman. Few expected the young Musashi to survive, yet somehow he did. That victory marked the beginning of an extraordinary journey. Rather than serving one lord permanently, Musashi wandered across Japan. He traveled mountain roads, crossed rivers, visited castles, studied under different teachers. Each journey became another lesson. Each duel became another opportunity to improve. Unlike many swordsmen, Musashi rarely relied upon elaborate technique alone. He carefully observed his opponents, their posture, their breathing, their habits. He believed victory often began long before swords were drawn. The mind he taught could become a stronger weapon than steel itself. One of his most unusual habits puzzled many contemporaries. He frequently arrived late to important duels. Modern readers sometimes mistake this for arrogance. Perhaps at times it was. Yet Musashi also understood something deeper. Patience unsettles those who wait. An opponent forced to stand beneath the rising sun, listening only to the waves, may begin exhausting himself before the duel even begins. Psychology quietly became another part of combat. The most famous of all his duels took place upon the small island of Ganyujima. His opponent, Sasaki Kajiro, enjoyed an extraordinary reputation of his own. Kajiro was elegant, highly disciplined. His unusually long sword had earned its own famous nickname. Many believed this duel would finally determine the greatest swordsman in Japan. On the appointed morning, Kajiro waited patiently along the shore. Time passed. The sun climbed higher. Still Musashi did not appear. Eventually, a small boat emerged across the water. Musashi stepped ashore. During the journey, according to tradition, he had carved a wooden sword from one of the boat's oars. Whether every detail is historically accurate remains uncertain. Yet the image became legendary. A simple wooden weapon against one of Japan's finest blades. The duel itself lasted only moments. No lengthy exchange followed. No dramatic conversation. Only two extraordinary swordsmen meeting one final time. When it ended, Musashi remained standing. Kajiro did not. The island has forever carried the memory of that quiet morning. Yet perhaps Musashi's greatest achievement came afterward. As Japan entered the long peace of the Edo period, he gradually fought fewer duels. Instead, he turned toward reflection, painting, calligraphy, poetry, meditation. He came to believe that mastering oneself mattered far more than defeating another person. Late in life, he retired to a cave known as Raigando. There, surrounded by remarkable silence, he wrote the work for which he is still celebrated around the world. The Book of Five Rings. Despite its reputation as a book about swordsmanship, much of it explores observation, discipline, adaptability, calm thinking, lessons that extend far beyond combat itself. Perhaps that explains why readers continue discovering it more than 3 centuries later. Musashi never encouraged unnecessary violence. Instead, he pursued understanding. Every duel taught him something. Every journey changed him. The sword gradually became less a weapon and more a path toward wisdom. Even today, visitors travel to Ganyujima Island. The sea remains remarkably peaceful. The waves gently reach the shore exactly as they did centuries ago. Statues of Musashi and Kojiro stand quietly facing one another, frozen forever in the final moments before history remembered their meeting. Standing there, it becomes surprisingly difficult to imagine the tension that once filled such a tranquil place. Perhaps that is history's quiet gift. Time softens even the loudest moments. As evening settles across the calm waters of the inland sea, the fishing boats slowly return to harbor. The island grows silent beneath the fading light. The tide continues its endless rhythm against the shore. Somewhere beyond the gentle sound of the waves, the memory of 2 swordsmen still lingers, not as enemies, but as reminders that the greatest victories are sometimes found not in defeating another person, but in spending a lifetime learning to understand oneself. On an autumn morning nearly 900 years ago, the sound of horses echoed across the valleys of eastern Japan. War banners fluttered above the hills. Messengers hurried between distant camps. The long struggle for control of the country had reached another turning point. Among the thousands preparing for battle, one warrior attracted more attention than most, not because of unusual armor, nor because of a famous family name, but because she was a woman riding at the front of the army. Her name was Tamo Gozen. Even today, she remains one of the most remarkable figures in Japanese history. For centuries, her story has inspired poets, artists, novelists, and historians alike. Yet perhaps the most fascinating part of her story is that history and legend have become almost impossible to separate. To understand Tamo, we must first return to the late 12th century. Japan was changing. For generations, the imperial court in Kyoto had guided the country, but beyond the capital, powerful warrior families were steadily growing stronger. Among them, 2 great clans stood above all others, the Minamoto and the Terror. Their rivalry eventually became known as the Genpei War, a conflict that would forever change Japan. For 5 years, battles unfolded across mountains, rivers, and coastal plains. Castles changed hands. Ancient alliances collapsed. Entire provinces found themselves drawn into the struggle. It was during these remarkable years that Tamo Gozen entered the historical record. Most of what we know about her comes from the Tale of the Hike, one of Japan's greatest historical epics. The chronicle describes Tamo as an exceptional warrior, an accomplished horse rider, a master of the bow, and highly skilled with the sword. The author also remarked upon her beauty, yet what truly distinguished her was neither appearance nor reputation. It was competence. When commanders required someone to lead cavalry, Tamo rode forward. When battles became difficult, she remained beside her lord. When danger approached, she did not retreat. In an age almost entirely remembered through the deeds of male warriors, Tamo earned her place through ability. She served Minamoto no Yoshinaka, one of the most talented generals of the Minamoto clan. Together they achieved remarkable victories. For a brief moment it even appeared that Yoshinaka might unite the country beneath his leadership. History, however, rarely follows simple paths. Political disagreements soon emerged within the Minamoto family itself. Former allies became rivals. The war changed direction once again. Eventually, Ashinarka found himself facing overwhelming opposition. The decisive moment arrived at the Battle of Awarzu, snow-covered parts of the surrounding fields. The morning air remained bitterly cold. Yashinarka's forces had been reduced to only a small number. His enemies greatly outnumbered him. Even then, the old stories tell us Tomo continued fighting. One famous passage describes her charging directly toward enemy warriors, her horse cutting confidently across the frozen ground, her armor gleaming beneath the winter sky. The image became one of the most enduring in Japanese history. Eventually, Ashinarka realized defeat had become inevitable. According to tradition, he ordered Tomo to leave the battlefield. Different versions explain his decision differently. Some suggest he wished to protect her. Others believe he wanted his final battle remembered as one fought only by men. Whatever his reasoning, Tomo reluctantly obeyed. She rode away from the battlefield and gradually disappeared from the historical record. What happened afterward remains one of Japan's greatest historical mysteries. Some accounts claimed she became a nun. Others suggest she married another warrior. A few legends insist she continued traveling across the country for many years. No contemporary record provides a definite answer. Perhaps history sometimes leaves certain stories unfinished. Modern historians continue debating how much of Tomo's story reflects historical fact and how much belongs to literature. Yet there is little doubt that women did participate in warfare throughout medieval Japan. Archaeological discoveries have uncovered the remains of female warriors buried with weapons. Historical documents occasionally mention women defending castles during times of siege. Tomo therefore represents something larger than a single individual. She reminds us that history is often more diverse than later generations imagine. Artists throughout Japan love depicting her, usually mounted upon a white horse, a long bow resting comfortably in her hands, her robes flowing behind her as she crossed wide autumn fields. These paintings emphasize dignity rather than violence, courage rather than conflict. Even today, Tomo Gozen continues inspiring writers and historians alike, not because every detail of her life can be proven, but because her story quietly challenges assumptions about the past. Standing today near the fields where the Battle of Awarzu once unfolded, one finds peaceful countryside. Farmers tend their crops. Birds circle above quiet rivers. The sounds of battle disappeared centuries ago. Only the landscape remains, patiently holding memories beneath the grass. As evening settles gently across the old battlefield, the autumn wind moves softly through the golden fields. Clouds drift slowly above distant mountains. The roads once traveled by countless warriors now welcome only quiet footsteps. Somewhere beyond the fading light, the memory of a lone rider continues her journey, her horse moving steadily across the hills, not toward another battle but into history itself, where a name has remained calmly and faithful for nearly 900 years. On a clear spring morning in the early 17th century, a white castle rose above the surrounding plains. Its walls reflected the first light of dawn. Its elegant rooftops seemed to float above layers of brilliant white stone. From a distance it almost appeared less like a fortress and more like a great bird preparing to take flight. Travelers approaching from miles away often stopped to admire it. Some believed it looked like a white heron spreading its wings across the sky. Others simply stood in silence. Even today it remains one of the most beautiful castles ever built. Its name is Honnō-ji Castle, and remarkably it has survived almost exactly as its builders intended. Unlike many castles remembered for great battles, Honnō-ji became famous for something quite different. It survived. To understand why that matters, we must first understand what castles meant in old Japan. During the Sengoku period, castles appeared across nearly every province. Some were little more than wooden forts upon steep hills. Others became enormous military centers. They protected important roads, stored food and weapons, housed powerful lords and their families. When war arrived, entire communities gathered behind their walls. A castle represented security, power, and hope. yet it also became a target.
Many famous castles disappeared in flames. Some were destroyed during fierce sieges. Others fell victim to earthquakes, lightning, or simply the passing of time.
Very few survived untouched.
Honnō-ji was different.
The hill upon which it stands had been fortified long before the great castle itself appeared.
During the 14th century, a modest defensive structure overlooked the surrounding countryside. As generations past different rulers strengthened its walls, expanded its defenses,
improved its towers.
Then at the beginning of the 17th century, everything changed. Ito Terumasu, one of the most trusted allies of Tokugawa Ieyasu, received the castle after the Battle of Sekigahara. Rather than making small improvements, he envisioned something extraordinary.
Construction began on one of the largest castle projects in Japanese history. Thousands of craftsmen arrived.
Stonecutters shaped enormous foundation blocks. Carpenters carefully assembled massive wooden beams without modern machinery. Roof tiles were carried by hand. Every part of the castle reflected astonishing precision. Years of patient work slowly transformed the hill into the magnificent structure we recognize today. The builders understood something important. A beautiful castle could also become an exceptionally strong one. From afar, the graceful white walls appeared welcoming.
Yet every pathway leading toward the central keep had been carefully designed.
Approaching armies found themselves following narrow, winding routes. Sharp turns prevented direct attacks. Hidden gates forced unfamiliar visitors to hesitate. Arrow slits overlooked every important approach. The castle itself quietly guided strangers exactly where its defenders wanted them to go.
It was architecture serving strategy.
One of Honnō-ji's greatest strengths lay in something surprisingly simple.
Confusion. An enemy entering the castle grounds for the first time often struggled to understand the layout.
The paths doubled back upon themselves. Courtyards appeared unexpectedly. Tower after tower overlooked one another. Even experienced soldiers could lose their sense of direction. Every moment spent searching became another moment for defenders to prepare. Remarkably, despite its extraordinary defenses, Honnō-ji Castle never experienced the great siege it had been designed to withstand.
The peaceful Edo period began soon after its completion. Large-scale warfare gradually disappeared. The magnificent fortress spent most of its history watching over peaceful towns rather than battlefields.
In time, that peace became its greatest protector.
Centuries passed. Governments changed.
Empires rose and fell. Japan entered the modern world.
Many castles across the country disappeared.
Some were dismantled after the feudal era ended.
Others burned during war.
Several were destroyed by earthquakes. Yet somehow Honnō-ji remained.
During the Second World War, bombing devastated many Japanese cities.
Honnō-ji itself suffered heavy attacks.
One incendiary bomb struck the castle. Astonishingly, it failed to explode.
The great wooden structure survived. Many locals still remember that remarkable piece of fortune. Again, history seemed to spare the White Heron. Today, visitors from around the world walk the same stone paths once climbed by samurai. They pause beneath towering gates, admire the intricate wooden beams, look across the surrounding city from the highest floors of the keep. What they often notice first is not the castle's military strength, but its quiet elegance. The white plaster walls glowed gently beneath changing seasons. Cherry blossoms frame the towers each spring. Autumn maples surround the stone foundations with brilliant shades of red and gold. Winter snow transforms the entire castle into something almost dreamlike. It feels timeless. Standing there, it becomes difficult to believe this remarkable place has watched over Japan for more than 400 years. Perhaps that is Honnō-ji's greatest achievement, not surviving battles,
but surviving history itself. As evening settles across the castle grounds, the final visitors slowly make their way toward the outer gates.
The gardens grow quiet. Swallows circle briefly above the highest rooftops before disappearing into the fading sky.
The white walls catch the final golden light of the setting sun. For another peaceful night, the great castle stands exactly where it always has,
watching silently over the plains below. patiently keeping the memories of centuries without ever needing to draw a sword. On the morning of October 21, 1600, a thick mist settled over the valley of Sekigahara. The hills surrounding the plain disappeared beneath drifting clouds. Autumn leaves covered the nearby forests in shades of crimson and gold.
For a little while the landscape seemed perfectly peaceful.
Birds called softly from the trees. The morning air carried the cool scent of approaching winter. Nothing about the valley suggested that before the day had ended the future of Japan would be decided here.
Historians often call it the Battle of Sekigahara, not because it was the largest battle ever fought in Japan,
nor because it lasted the longest, but because no other single day changed the country's future so completely. To understand why, we must return only 2 years earlier.
Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the great unifier who had completed much of Oda Nobunaga's work, had passed away. For decades, Hideyoshi had held together a country finally emerging from generations of civil war.
Yet one enormous problem remained.
His son Hidoro was still a child.
A child could not easily command dozens of powerful warlords. Someone would inevitably seek greater influence. Soon Japan quietly divided into 2 great alliances.
Supporting the young Toyotomi family was a coalition led by Ishida Mitsunari.
Standing opposite them was Tokugawa Ieyasu,
already one of the most experienced leaders in the country. Patient, careful,
known for thinking years ahead rather than weeks.
Neither side desired endless uncertainty.
Both understood that eventually the question would have to be settled. The valley of Sekigahara lay at one of the most important crossroads in Japan. Roads from eastern and western provinces converged there.
Armies moving across the country naturally passed through its wide plain.
It became the perfect place for 2 enormous forces to meet. Before dawn, soldiers quietly took their positions.
Some climbed nearby hills.
Others waited among open fields. Thousands of banners stood motionless in the morning mist, each displaying the symbols of different clans, each representing generations of family history,
each waiting for the first command.
The exact number of soldiers remains debated.
Many historians estimate that around 160,000 men stood upon the battlefield, an astonishing number for the time.
Farmers, samurai, archers, spearmen, horsemen. Entire provinces had gathered within a single valley. For several hours the mist remained thick. Visibility became difficult. Commanders struggled to see beyond nearby hills. The tension grew heavier with every passing moment. Then, as the sun gradually rose, the fog slowly began lifting. Across the valley, Charmy finally saw the other clearly.
The battle had begun.
The fighting was fierce. Lines of spearmen advanced across open ground. Arquebusiers fired disciplined volleys. Mounted samurai searched for openings along the enemy lines. The valley echoed with drums, war cries, and the sounds of thousands of soldiers moving together. Yet despite the intensity of the fighting, the outcome remained uncertain. Several powerful clans had chosen to wait upon nearby hills.
Watching, observing,
undecided. Among them stood Kobekawa Hidaki, a young lord whose decision would become one of the most discussed moments in Japanese history. For hours his army remained still.
Neither side knew what he intended.
Messengers came and went. The battle below continued. Finally, late in the morning, everything changed.
Kobekawa ordered his troops forward, but instead of attacking Tokugawa Ieyasu, they charged into the forces of Ishida Mitsunari.
The betrayal shook the battlefield. Other hesitant commanders quickly followed. Within minutes, the balance of the entire battle shifted. The Western army began collapsing. Its carefully organized lines dissolved into confusion.
By afternoon, the outcome could no longer be reversed.
Tokugawa Ieyasu had won. Remarkably, the battle itself lasted only a single day, yet its consequences would shape more than 2.5 centuries of Japanese history. 3 years later, Tokugawa Ieyasu became shogun.
His government established its capital in Edo.
The Tokugawa shogunate would guide Japan until the middle of the 19th. century, the long peace of the Edo period had begun. Looking back, many historians see Sekigahara as the final chapter of the Sengoku era.
The age of warring states had finally ended.
Not every conflict disappeared immediately. History is rarely so simple. Yet after generations of uncertainty, the country gradually found stability. Roads became safer. Trade expanded. Towns flourished.
Art, literature, and education entered a remarkable period of growth.
Peace itself became Japan's greatest achievement. Today the fields of Sekigahara appear surprisingly quiet. Walking trails wind gently across the valley. Small museums preserve armor maps and personal belongings from those remarkable days. Autumn still paints the surrounding hills with brilliant colors. The same mountains continue watching over the plain exactly as they did more than 400 years ago. Standing there, it becomes difficult to imagine thousands of banners once covering the valley floor. Only the wind moves across the fields now, softly bending the tall grass beneath an open sky.
As evening settles over Sekigahara, the last visitors quietly make their way home. The autumn sun disappears behind distant mountains.
Mist slowly begins returning to the valley. The roads grow peaceful once more.
The battlefield fades gently into silence.
And beneath the first stars of the evening, a land that once decided the future of a nation finally rests again.
On a quiet spring morning in the year 1543, a child was born inside a small castle in Mikara province.
No one celebrating that morning could have imagined that this quiet boy would one day bring peace to an entire nation.
His name at birth was Matsudaira Teichio. History would remember him by another name,
Tokugawa Ieyasu. Few people have lived a life as patient as his. Many famous rulers are remembered for bold decisions, great speeches, or dramatic victories. Ieyasu became great because he understood something far less exciting but often far more powerful: the value of waiting.
His childhood was anything but peaceful.
Japan remained trapped within the Sengoku era, the age of warring states. Powerful clans fought endlessly.
Castles changed hands.
Alliances shifted like the seasons. Children born into samurai families often became political hostages.
Teichio was no exception. Before reaching his 10th birthday, he had already been separated from his parents.
Sent from one powerful clan to another, not because anyone wished him harm, but because such exchanges helped secure fragile alliances. Imagine spending your childhood surrounded by strangers, living in castles that were never truly your home, watching powerful adults decide your future.
Without ever asking your opinion.
Perhaps those early years quietly shaped the man he would become.
Rather than growing impatient, he learned to observe. Rather than speaking first, he learned to listen. When opportunities finally appeared, he understood their value. As he entered adulthood, Japan remained divided among dozens of ambitious warlords.
Among them, two names rose above the rest: Oda Nobunaga and later Toyotomi Hideyoshi.
Ieyasu fought beside both men,
sometimes as an ally, occasionally as a rival, always with extraordinary caution.
While others rushed toward glory, quietly strengthened his own lands, improved his castles,
rewarded loyal followers,
expanded agriculture, built stable communities. He understood that lasting power depended not only upon armies but upon ordinary people living peaceful lives. The turning point arrived in 1582. Oda Nobunaga died during the incident at Honnō-ji. Japan once again faced uncertainty.
Hideyoshi eventually emerged victorious.
Rather than challenging him immediately, Ieyasu patiently accepted reality. He waited.
Years passed. Hideyoshi unified much of Japan.
Then in 1598, Hideyoshi himself passed away. His heir remained only a child. History had once again created an opening.
Many leaders hurried to seize power.
Ieyasu did not. Instead, he carefully built alliances,
strengthened old friendships,
allowed others to underestimate his intentions.
When conflict finally became unavoidable, it came at Sekigahara. The victory you heard about in the previous chapter transformed everything. After the battle, no rival possessed enough strength to challenge him successfully. 3 years later, in 1006, the emperor officially appointed Tokugawa Ieyasu as shogun. The ceremony itself appeared remarkably simple. No great conquest followed.
No dramatic celebration echoed across the country.
Instead, Japan quietly entered a new era, one that would last more than 250 years. The Tokugawa shogunate established its government in Edo.
At the time, Edo remained far smaller than Kyoto. Yet Ieyasu saw possibilities others overlooked. Roads improved.
Bridges multiplied.
Merchants arrived. Craftsmen followed.
Within only a few generations, Edo became one of the largest cities on earth.
Perhaps even more impressive than his victories was what came afterward. Many rulers spend their lives conquering kingdoms.
Few know how to preserve peace once victory has been achieved. Ieyasu devoted enormous attention to stability.
The great highways connecting Japan were carefully maintained.
Castles became administrative centers rather than military headquarters. Agriculture expanded. Trade flourished. Education slowly became more widespread. The country gradually healed from more than a century of continuous warfare.
Of course, peace required difficult decisions. Strict social rules emerged.
Travel became carefully regulated. The government watched potential rivals closely. Modern historians continue debating many of these policies. History rarely offers perfect leaders. Every achievement carries its own complexities. Yet few dispute one remarkable fact. The peace established during Ieyasu's lifetime endured for over 2.5 centuries. Few governments anywhere in the world have enjoyed such remarkable stability. Late in life, Ieyasu gradually transferred authority to his son. Even then, he continued offering advice from behind the scenes. He understood something few rulers accepted easily. A nation should become stronger than any single individual.
When he passed away in 1616, he left behind something far greater than a powerful army. He left behind order. His final resting place became Nekotoshogu,
a magnificent shrine nestled among towering cedar forests. Visitors climbing its ancient stone steps today often pause beneath the enormous trees. The air remains wonderfully cool, the forest almost perfectly silent. Sunlight filters gently through branches that have watched over the shrine for centuries. It feels less like a monument to military power and more like a place built to honor patience itself.
As evening settles across the cedar forests of Nikko, the last visitors quietly descend toward the town below.
The stone lanterns begin catching the fading light. A gentle breeze moves softly through the ancient trees. Somewhere among those peaceful woods, the memory of a boy once sent away from home who grew into the man who finally brought peace to a weary nation continues resting quietly beneath the mountains. On a quiet spring morning in the year 1578, workers gathered along the shores of Osaka Bay. The tide moved gently against the land. Fishing boats drifted peacefully beyond the harbor.
Merchants unloaded rice, timber, and stone from arriving vessels.
At first glance, it looked like any other busy morning in 16th century Japan. Yet something extraordinary was about to begin. An enormous fortress would soon rise beside the water.
Not simply another castle,
but one intended to become the heart of a united Japan.
Its name would be Osaka Castle. Today, millions of visitors admire its elegant white walls and shimmering golden decorations.
Few realize that beneath the modern castle lies the memory of one of the greatest construction projects in Japanese history, and one of its greatest tragedies. The story begins with Toyotomi Hideyoshi.
Only a generation earlier, Hideyoshi had been born the son of a humble farmer. Unlike many powerful leaders of his age, he possessed neither noble birth nor ancient family titles. Through remarkable intelligence, determination, and years of loyal service beneath Oda Nobunaga, he gradually rose higher than anyone believed possible. After Nobunaga's death, Hideyoshi completed the work of unifying Japan. Yet victory alone was not enough.
He wished to create something lasting, a symbol of peace, power, and stability.
For that, he needed a castle unlike any the country had ever seen.
Construction began in 1583. The chosen site held great importance.
Centuries early, a famous Buddhist temple had stood there.
The surrounding rivers connected much of western Japan. Merchants could easily reach the area by boat. Armies could move supplies efficiently. The location offered both beauty and remarkable strategic value. Thousands of workers soon arrived.
Stonecutters climbed distant mountains searching for enormous boulders.
Forests provided massive cedar and cypress beams.
Carpenters shaped each timber with astonishing precision.
Boats carried countless building materials through Osaka Bay.
The entire country seemed to contribute.
Some of the largest stones still visible today weigh well over 100 tons. Even modern visitors often pause beside them in quiet amazement. How, without modern machinery, did people move such incredible weight?
The answer was neither magic nor impossible strength. It was patience.
Hundreds of workers.
Wooden rollers.
Ropes woven from natural fibers. Careful planning.
Every movement required complete coordination.
Sometimes transporting a single stone took weeks.
Perhaps even months.
Little by little the castle slowly emerged.
Its white walls reflected the changing seasons. Golden ornaments glittered beneath the sun.
Watchtowers overlooked rivers stretching toward the sea.
Visitors arriving by boat often described seeing the castle long before reaching the harbor.
It appeared almost to rise directly from the water itself. The fortress quickly became more than a military headquarters.
It became a city.
Merchants opened shops nearby.
Craftsmen established workshops. Tea masters held elegant gatherings.
Gardens bloomed within carefully designed courtyards. Life flourished around the growing castle. Yet history rarely allows greatness to remain unchanged for long.
In 1598, Toyotomi Hideyoshi passed away. His son Hidori inherited the castle while still a child.
As you have already heard, Tokugawa Ieyasu gradually became the most powerful leader in Japan.
At first, the Toyotomi family remained safely within Osaka Castle.
Both sides watched one another carefully.
Peace endured for a little while.
Eventually, the tension became impossible to ignore. In 1614, the winter siege of Osaka began.
The castle's enormous walls proved exactly as strong as their builders had intended.
Cannons fired.
Soldiers attacked.
Yet the fortress continued standing. Negotiations finally brought a temporary peace. Moats were partially filled.
Defensive earthworks reduced.
Many believed the conflict had ended. Instead, it merely paused. The following summer, the fighting returned. The summer siege of Osaka.
This time, the castle could not be saved.
Fires spread across the great buildings. Smoke rose high above the city. Hidori's resistance finally came to an end. The Toyotomi family disappeared from history. The magnificent castle built to symbolize a united Japan now stood in ruins. Yet remarkably, its story did not end there. The Tokugawa government rebuilt much of the fortress. Later generations repaired it again. Lightning struck several towers.
They were rebuilt.
Fires damaged the buildings.
They rose once more. Wars passed.
Earthquakes came and went.
The castle continued returning.
Each generation quietly added another chapter to its long history. Standing within Osaka Castle today, it is easy to admire the graceful architecture, the polished gates, the quiet gardens, the wide stone walls reflected in still water.
Yet beneath every pathway lies another castle,
and beneath that another. Centuries of rebuilding have layered history almost like pages within a book. Every stone remembers a different age. Every foundation belongs to another generation. As evening settles across Osaka, the crowds gradually leave the castle grounds. Cherry blossoms drift gently across the quiet moats.
The setting sun turns the white walls a soft shade of gold.
The water becomes perfectly still,
reflecting the castle exactly as though time itself has paused.
Beneath those peaceful reflections, hidden beneath centuries of careful rebuilding, the first great castle of Hideyoshi still quietly rests, waiting patiently, remembering the dream of one farmer's son who believed an entire nation could finally become one. Long before Japan became a single nation, before great castles rose above the plains, before samurai governed the land, one mountain already watched quietly over the islands. Its snow-covered summit rose above the clouds. Its perfect slopes court the first light of dawn. Travelers saw it from distant roads. Fishermen recognized it from the sea. Poets struggled to describe its beauty. Generations came and went. The mountain remained unchanged.
Its name was Mount Fuji.
Today it is perhaps the most recognizable symbol of Japan. Yet for most of its history, people did not simply admire Fuji.
They revered it.
To many it was never merely a mountain.
It was a sacred place where the natural world seemed to touch the heavens.
Long before written history, Fuji was already shaping the lives of those who lived nearby. The mountain itself is a volcano. Powerful eruptions occurred throughout ancient times. Some transformed nearby forests. Others covered villages with ash. To early communities, the mountain possessed immense power.
It could provide fertile soil. It could also bring destruction.
People naturally sought ways to understand such a force.
Many believed powerful spirits known as kami resided within the mountain.
Offerings were placed near its slopes. Prayers were spoken before long journeys. Respect became part of everyday life. As centuries passed, stories surrounding Fuji continued growing. By the 8th century, poets were already celebrating its beauty. One of Japan's oldest collections of poetry, the Manyoshu*, contains verses praising the mountain.
Not for its danger, but for its remarkable presence.
Standing beneath the open sky, Fuji seemed eternal, always watching, always waiting.
As Buddhism spread throughout Japan, the mountain gained new meaning. Rather than replacing older beliefs, Buddhist teachings blended with local traditions.
Mountain ascetics known as Yamabushi began training among remote peaks. For them, climbing mountains became a spiritual journey.
Every step represented discipline, reflection, and humility.
Fuji gradually became one of the greatest destinations for such pilgrims.
Reaching its summit was never considered easy.
The climb demanded patience. Steep volcanic slopes tested every traveler. Cold winds greeted those nearing the top.
Yet perhaps the difficulty itself gave the journey its meaning.
A sacred destination should not be reached carelessly.
By the medieval period, pilgrimages to Mount Fuji had become increasingly common.
Groups of ordinary people saved money for years. Farmers,
craftsmen, merchants,
all hoped to climb the mountain at least once during their lives.
Many belonged to religious communities called Fujiko.
Together they prayed, prepared, and eventually began the long ascent. The journey itself often lasted several days. Travelers rested at small stations built along the trails. They shared simple meals, watched the sunrise together, encouraged one another through difficult sections of the climb. Reaching the summit became less an individual achievement and more a shared experience.
One moment especially captured the imagination of countless pilgrims.
Watching the sunrise from Fuji's summit. As darkness slowly faded, the first golden light spread across distant clouds. The world below gradually emerged from the night. Villages, rivers, forests, lakes. Everything appeared astonishingly peaceful. Many believed witnessing that sunrise brought spiritual renewal, a reminder of how small human worries become when viewed from the highest places.
Artists also found endless inspiration upon Fuji, perhaps none more famous than Katsushika Hokusai. His series *36 Views of Mount Fuji presented the mountain in every season.
Seen from villages, across rivers, behind great waves. Sometimes Fuji dominated the landscape. Other times it quietly rested in the distance. Always present, always calm. The paintings traveled far beyond Japan, introducing countless people around the world to the mountain's timeless beauty. Even during the rapid modernization of the 19th century, Fuji remained unchanged.
Railways appeared, cities expanded,
factories rose, yet the mountain continued greeting each new generation exactly as it had greeted those before.
Its quiet permanence became one of its greatest gifts.
Today, millions of people visit Mount Fuji every year. Some climb to the summit. Others admire it from nearby lakes. Many simply pause when it appears beyond the horizon. No matter how often it is seen, the mountain somehow continues inspiring silence. Perhaps that is the greatest sign of something truly remarkable.
Not excitement, not astonishment, but quiet reflection. As evening settles across the foothills, the last hikers slowly descend the mountain trails.
The forests grow peaceful. The wind moves gently across the volcanic slopes. High above, the summit catches the final light of the setting sun. For one brief moment, the snow glows softly against the darkening sky. Then night quietly embraces the mountain once more, just as it has for thousands of years, patiently watching over Japan, waiting peacefully for another dawn to arrive. On the morning of July 8, 1853, fishermen working near the entrance to Edo Bay noticed something unusual upon the horizon.
At first they appeared as little more than dark shapes rising through the morning mist, larger than ordinary merchant ships, far taller than any vessel most Japanese had ever seen.
As the hours passed, the strange silhouettes slowly grew clearer. Then thin columns of black smoke began rising into the sky. The ships moved without relying entirely upon the wind.
For many watching from the shore, it seemed almost impossible.
Some believed the vessels themselves were burning. Others wondered whether they had somehow harnessed fire itself to cross the sea. Before long, the entire coastline was watching. The visitors would soon become known throughout Japan as the Black Ships. Their arrival marked one of the greatest turning points in the nation's history. For more than 2 centuries, Japan had lived beneath the peaceful stability of the Tokugawa Shogunate.
As you heard in an earlier chapter, the country had carefully limited contact with much of the outside world.
Trade continued through selected ports. Knowledge still entered Japan through Dutch and Chinese merchants. Yet the government controlled those exchanges with extraordinary care.
Generations had grown up believing this balance would continue indefinitely. Then 4 unfamiliar warships quietly entered Edo Bay.
They belonged to the United States Navy. Their commander was Commodore Matthew Perry.
His mission appeared simple: deliver a letter from the President of the United States.
The letter requested that Japan open its ports to American ships. Trade,
friendship,
and diplomatic relations.
The request itself was polite.
The circumstances surrounding it were impossible to ignore. Perry's steam-powered warships represented technologies unlike anything Japan possessed.
Their heavy cannons reminded everyone watching that military strength stood behind every diplomatic conversation.
The Tokugawa government suddenly faced one of the most difficult decisions in its history. Should the request be refused as earlier governments had refused similar demands?
Or had the world changed too much?
Messengers hurried along the great roads connecting Edo with every corner of the country.
Senior officials gathered in urgent meetings.
Scholars studied maps. Advisors debated late into the night.
For perhaps the first time in centuries, no answer seemed entirely safe.
Perry remained only a short time before departing.
He promised one thing: he would return. True to his word, the following year he appeared again, this time with an even larger fleet.
The negotiations continued. Eventually, Japan signed the Convention of Kanagawa. Several ports opened to American vessels.
Shipwrecked sailors would receive assistance.
Diplomatic relations quietly began. To many outside observers, the agreement seemed modest. To Japan, it represented the beginning of an entirely new age. The quiet world that had endured for generations was beginning to change. News of the agreement spread across the country. Some welcomed new opportunities. Others feared foreign influence. Many simply felt uncertain. Ordinary merchants wondered how trade might change. Samurai debated the future of the shogunate. Farmers continued tending their fields, watching history unfold from a distance. Within only a few years, other nations arrived.
Russia,
France,
the Netherlands,
Each sought agreements of their own.
Japan gradually found itself entering an increasingly connected world.
The political consequences proved enormous. Many believed the Tokugawa government had become too cautious.
Others argued that resisting modern powers would only bring disaster.
The disagreements gradually grew stronger. Eventually, the Tokugawa shogunate came to an end. In 1868, the Meiji Restoration began. Japan entered one of the most remarkable periods of modernization in world history.
Railways appeared, factories expanded,
modern schools opened.
Steamships filled busy harbors. Within only a few decades, the country transformed itself at astonishing speed. Yet standing upon the shores of Uraga, today it is difficult to imagine the uncertainty felt by those who first watched the black ships appear beyond the morning mist. The bay remains peaceful.
Fishing boats still cross the water. The sea reflects the changing colors of the sky exactly as it always has. Only history has changed. Sometimes great transformations do not begin with battles, nor revolutions. Sometimes they begin with distant ships slowly appearing upon the horizon. As evening settles gently across Tokyo Bay, their final ferries return toward the harbor. The water grows wonderfully still. Far beyond the quiet waves, the horizon slowly fades into twilight. Somewhere in the imagination of history, four dark ships continue approaching through the morning mist.
Patiently, silently,
carrying with them the end of one era and the quiet beginning of another. On a cool autumn morning in the year 1867, a man sat quietly inside Nijo Castle in Kyoto.
Outside, the maple leaves had begun turning brilliant shades of crimson and gold.
A gentle breeze carried them across the castle gardens. The ponds reflected a perfectly clear sky.
Everything appeared peaceful. Yet within those quiet walls a decision was about to end more than 2.5 centuries of Japanese history.
The man was Tokugawa Ieyasu, the 15th and final shogun of Japan. Unlike many rulers remembered for great battles, Ieyasu is remembered for something remarkably different.
He chose to let an era end. To understand why that decision mattered so deeply, we must briefly remember everything that had come before.
For more than 250 years, the Tokugawa shogunate had governed Japan. Generations had been born, lived, and passed away, knowing no other government. Roads connected every province. Trade flourished. Great cities expanded. The arts reached extraordinary heights.
For many people, the Edo period felt permanent.
Yet history is always changing, even when those living through it cannot yet see the change. After the arrival of Commodore Perry's black ships, Japan entered a period of enormous uncertainty. Foreign nations sought new treaties. Modern technology spread rapidly.
Steam engines, telegraphs, modern weapons, ideas from across the world arrived faster than ever before.
Many believed Japan needed fundamental reform.
Others wished to preserve the traditions that had guided the country for centuries. Neither side hated Japan.
Both believed they were protecting its future. The disagreement lay only in how that future should be shaped. Tokugawa Ieyasu became shogun in 1866.
He was intelligent, well-educated, deeply aware of the enormous challenges facing the country. Unlike some early leaders, he understood that the old political system could not remain unchanged forever. He attempted reforms,
military modernization, administrative improvements,
closer study of Western technology.
Yet events moved faster than anyone expected. Political pressure continued growing.
Powerful domains such as Satsuma and Choshu increasingly supported restoring greater authority to the emperor. Throughout the country, people quietly wondered what would happen next.
Would another long civil war begin? Would centuries of peace disappear? No one knew. Then in November of 1867, Ieyasu made one of the most remarkable decisions in Japanese history.
He voluntarily returned governing authority to the emperor. The act became known as Daisehaken, the restoration of imperial rule. Few political leaders willingly surrender power.
Fewer still do so after governing one of the world's most stable states for generations.
Yoshinobu hoped this decision might prevent unnecessary conflict. History, however, rarely follows the hopes of any one individual. Tensions continued rising. Eventually the Boshin War began. Compared with the great wars of earlier centuries, the conflict remained relatively brief. Modern weapons appeared beside traditional swords. Steamships sailed alongside wooden vessels. Japan seemed to stand between two different ages at once. The decisive battles gradually favored the imperial forces. Yoshinobu chose not to prolong the fighting unnecessarily. Rather than defending Edo until destruction became inevitable, he surrendered the city peacefully. Because of that decision, much of Edo escaped the devastation that often accompanied great sieges. The city would soon receive a new name, Tokyo, the eastern capital. The emperor moved there. A new chapter of Japanese history quietly began. The Meiji era transformed the country with astonishing speed. Railways crossed the islands. Factories rose beside rivers. Schools expanded. Modern industries flourished. Within only a few decades, Japan had become one of the most rapidly modernizing nations in the world. Amid all these extraordinary changes, Yoshinobu quietly withdrew from political life. He never attempted another rebellion, never sought to reclaim his former position. Instead, he devoted himself to quieter pursuits: photography, painting, cycling, hunting, gardening. Friends often remarked that he seemed remarkably content. Perhaps after carrying the weight of an entire nation, an ordinary life offered its own quiet peace. Today, visitors walking through Nijo Castle in Kyoto often admire its elegant wooden floors. The famous nightingale flaws still chirped softly beneath each careful step. Golden screen paintings brighten the audience halls. Beautiful gardens surround the old palace. Standing there, it is difficult to imagine that one of Japan's greatest political transitions unfolded within such peaceful surroundings. No great battle, no dramatic speech, only quiet conversation followed by one of history's most consequential decisions. As evening settles across the gardens of Nijo Castle, the last visitors slowly make their way toward the gates. The maple leaves drift gently across the stone paths. The ponds become perfectly still. The old palace rests peacefully beneath the fading light. The voices that once debated the future of an entire nation have long since fallen silent. Only the quiet gardens remain. Watching patiently as one era gently gave way to another without forgetting the centuries that came before,